Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this edition of the Big East Rewind. I am your 7-foot host, Chuck Everson, and as always, the man that brings the sunshine into every room he walks into, Sonny Spera. How are you today, Sonny?
I'm great, Chuck. Got one of my guys here, man. I'm excited.
Another one of you guys.
Favorite guys to watch.
Yep, that's right. And this guy is one of the best leaders probably ever. His nickname comes from being a leader. So, we're going to talk about the general, Sherman Douglas today. He's coming on the show with us. So that ought to be a lot of fun. We're going to have a good time with him today, Sonny.
Yep, I can't wait.
So without any further ado, this guy, when he left Syracuse, he held the Syracuse scoring record with 2,060 points. He also held the NCAA assist record with 960 dimes he dropped. And he was the first pick of the second round for the Miami Heat. And he was their first starting point guard, all NBA first team, all rookie team, the general, Sherman Douglas. How are you, Sherman? Nice to have you on.
Nice to be here. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So, Sonny talks about, Syracuse and the whole thing up there, and what it's like playing for Coach B and all that kind of stuff, and, I don't think that Coach gets all those wins without you running the floor without being the coach on the floor. Is that kind of where that whole thing came about, the general, or where did that come from, that nickname, and who gave you that?
Well, I don't know where it came from. It definitely came from somewhere up Syracuse, but I just think that the way Coach style and the way he played, he gave the point guard freedom. And I can't take all credit for Coach's wins. You have to go back to Marty Head, Ed Moss, and obviously Dwayne Pearl Washington. Ed Moss was a great influence for me. He really talked to me especially my freshman year when I wasn't playing a lot. And he set me down and he taught me a lot of things that I was expected from me from being a Syracuse point guard. And I listened to him a lot.
Yeah.
So when you get, let's talk, before you get to Syracuse, talk a little bit about playing ball in Washington, D.C., what kind of competition that was. And then how did you get Syracuse as your primary school?
Well, playing ball in Washington, D.C. was very competitive. I think really back in that day, playing on the East Coast, you had Philly, you had Baltimore, you had New York, obviously, was definitely competitive. And playing in Washington was no different. It was always competitive. And when I played against, in my neighborhood, I played against older guys because a lot of young guys really wasn't playing basketball. So I wanted to play against older guys. And what I wound up thinking or wound up noticing is it made me a better basketball player than playing against guys my age who I were better than. So I just played against older guys. It was tough because they wouldn't allow me into their club, sort of speaking. But it took me to prove myself. And once I proved myself, it was all downhill from there.
Now that's typically like Georgetown and Maryland kind of own that area. How did, Syracuse didn't have, we had Mike Brown, we had Herman Harried, so we had some connection to DC but that was more Baltimore. DC was, kind of John Thompson, Georgetown area. Was that something that was going on too, or no?
To be honest, Georgetown as a youth or just playing in high school was my number one choice. They were the number one choice of a lot of people who went to Georgetown or who was in DC because of how they played, the coach, and just the style they played. They played pressure. They played 94 feet. Offensively and defensively, they were in your face. They were pressure. And they were who I wanted to play for, but obviously I couldn't play for. They didn't recruit me, so I had to go where somebody wanted me to play for them.
And look, and right, you're basically 2,000. You don't hear those numbers from anybody. 2,000 points in college, 1,000 assists, and you've got other stat lines and numbers. So. And I think watching you play, there's no way your style fits Georgia. Your style fits Syracuse, up and down the floor, run, get out and transition and, high flying act. I don't know. So how did that come about with Coach B?
Well, I wanted to be Georgetown because of they sort of played like I played in high school. When we was in high school, we had like 3 guards and we pressured 94 feet and we played defense and we ran up and down. Georgetown was similar to that, but their offensive was a little bit more structured than what it was in Syracuse.
Yep.
And they had obviously they had Patrick Ewing inside, but we had Michael Graham. Michael Graham was on my high school team, so I was like, go to Georgetown. I think I can go to Georgetown too, but that wasn't the case. My senior year was a good senior year in high school. We won all our games. We were 31-0. We beat the Mather. We were number one in DC area, and I wanted to go there, but my offers wasn't coming right away because we had 3 guards, and I was the tallest out of 3. So they was like, well, maybe he's a 2 guard at 6 foot. He maybe can't play point guard, but I played point guard my whole life until I got the sting on, because we had smaller guards, and that was our talent. That was our go-to, was being quick, being out there, being, defensively and all that.
Yeah.
Well, your stat line in high school, 27 points per game, 8 assists per game, 3 steals per game. I don't know how that's a miss.
We bloomed late, and what was good about our team, we had a great chemistry. It was sort of like our Syracuse, my sophomore year, the 87 team that went to the championship. We had chemistry. We probably wasn't the best team, but we had chemistry, and we won all our games. We won all our games the summer before in summer league, and we just had a chemistry of guys coming back from my 11th grade year to the 12th grade year. It was the same squad. We had a good team, and we played well together.
Okay. Was that considered where you were, Sherman, PG County? Is that, in that area?
No, I was in DC. So gentrification changed DC a little bit, where a lot of the players who were in the city moved to Prince George's County, which made it, I guess, with that documentary with Kevin Durant and all those guys.
Right.
PG, it's basically the parents of those went to Prince George's County. But I was basically DC, and DC was where everybody was.
Yeah, there was a lot of ballers that came out of that area. I mean, and 30, 40, 50 guys that played in the league from that general area. So there was a lot. It was like a hotbed for that kind of stuff. So you talked about, you weren't recruited by Georgetown. Who were you recruited by? Where were your final choices before you chose Syracuse?
My final choices was Old Dominion. Old Dominion was recruiting me hard. They recruited me from like my 11th grade. And I was like, if they want me so bad, well, maybe I need to go there, because they really wanting me. It was Rutgers. It was Maryland came on a little bit late, Connecticut, and but growing up, it was the Big East. When I got to high school, early before high school, it was ACC. I can remember, Duke, NC State, all those guys in Maryland. But when I got to high school, it was the Big East. And when I saw Pearl Washington on TV, I was like, that's a place where I really wanted to go. If the coach can give that much freedom to a point guard, maybe that's somewhere I need to go.
I was just going to ask you that, because that's what a lot of guys said that are our age, that everybody was talking ACC. All of a sudden, the switch flipped, and it was Big East. So the switch for you was watching Pearl, or was it just in general, coming up before you started? I mean, there was some success early on in the Big East with our team at Nova, and with the Georgetown team winning the national championships, and all the teams that came through. Was it Pearl that did that for you, or was it the overall style of play?
It was all the above. It was obviously that I think it was 84 when you had St. John's, Villanova, and Georgetown in the Final Four. 84 is one of those. And you look at that, you look at the success that conference had quickly. And think of St. John's when they had, the team they had, Walter Berry, Chris Mullen, and Georgetown, they got a lot of publicity just being in the Washington, D.C. area, and they played their tournaments in the Garden. And once you saw Pearl Washington in the Garden, and that tournament was unbelievable. The moves he put on Georgetown, which was a great defensive team, and he threw the whole thing, and Chris Mullen, Thompson, Lou Conaseca, how could you not go? They had characters, and even Coach Boeheim. That's something that excited me as a young player, that you want to be there because it wasn't a lot of outlets back then that it is now. So once you saw the Big East and you saw Big Monday was a turn for every young basketball player coming up.
Right.
So I got to ask you. So you go to Syracuse, and now you play your first freshman year alongside Pearl, right? Pearl's the starting point guard, and you're backing him up, right. And he's your guy. He's the guy that you kind of followed. Let's talk about, how did that work out for you? I mean, I know it was not what you wanted, but how did you handle that?
It wasn't what I wanted, but it wasn't something I signed up for. I knew that he was there, and he was possibly there. There was rumors that he was going to leave his junior year. But I had to prepare myself that if he stayed for a senior year, I got 2 years to play and start. The difficult part was, you play some games, you don't play none. That's something you sign up for. The difficult part for me was that I thought I was playing well in practice. I was pushing him. I tried to push Pro as much as possible because he wasn't a great practice player.
Yeah, no kidding. Yeah.
And I did that. The part that was difficult with me was when we had Raphael Addison and Wendell Alexis was seniors. And when it was time for recruiting, I saw a lot of point guards and a lot of guards coming in to be recruited. And I'm like, well, wait a minute. Maybe he don't see himself. Maybe coach don't see himself where I see myself. And that was a difficult part for me. And then you're not playing as much. So I didn't know how to handle that coming in. And I remember making phone calls home saying, I may have to leave because maybe coach don't value me the way I think I should be valued.
But you had with sitting on the bench at times could be better for some people because now you're watching from a different perspective, almost like a coach where you're absorbing everything. Did you work did Pearl talk to you about any of that kind of stuff? Did he help you out with, being like a big brother kind of thing to kind of work you through?
No, he didn't. And you're absolutely right. Sometimes it's sort of like being, let's say, professional football, professional quarterback. Right. Do you want to throw the guys in right away, or do you want to sit with the clipboard and see what he can learn? That was my job. Read with the clipboard and learn. That wasn't hard for me. The hard part about it is if you recruit another point guard to come behind me, and I'm a sophomore and he's a freshman, and he played for me, then it's no room for me to play. That was on in my mind because I had a roommate, Rodney Walker, who was a power forward. And we talked about that because Dirk Coleman was coming the next year. So if Dirk Coleman coming to play and he had the same position, he's not going to get no playing time.
Right.
So that's somebody recruiting over you. And I'm like, okay, well, he's recruiting over me. Maybe this is not the school for me.
Was it at that point, because you can arguably say, and Sonny's going to laugh now because we have this thing about me. I'm a big guy. He's a point guard. We go back and forth. You can arguably say that the point guard was kind of the most important position on the floor because, he's kind of running the show.
Not arguably, just say it. Just say it. Was
I can't
the most
just say
important.
it.
I can say it. It was the most important position on the floor. Is the most important.
So what I'm saying to you is you could sit there and absorb all of that. And now you got to let Boeheim know that you are ready to run the show after Washington is ready to leave. You are ready to take over that role as the leader on the floor and the coach, quote unquote, on the court, right? And not a two guard because I guess he saw you as a two when he's bringing these other point guards in for visits, right? Is that kind of what's going through your head?
I don't think he saw me because all I did was play point guard in college.
Yeah.
Even on the bench, it was me and Greg Monroe, who was pretty on the bench, who were running the second team. So I was playing a point guard. I think that the difficult part was it was no way I could play if I had a McDonald's All-American as a freshman and I'm a sophomore and he going to start before me and I'm a sophomore. I knew it wasn't going to be a place to be. I'm glad I stayed there. I listened to my gut and said, well, let me just stick it out. Back then, the most important part, maybe I can say the center was probably the most important because of the way the style of play is played. The center was probably the most important. Right now, I think the point guard is the most important because the center is facing up out on the perimeter and everything's open. But back, everything was run inside out. Now it's outside. Now it was inside out. Now it's outside in.
Sure.
And it had it been now these times, you might have got out of there with the portal the way it is and everything. Too many kids are taking the easy way out now. If things aren't going their way.
You don't have to make Chuck feel good, okay? It's all right, man. He's a center. It's okay. It pained him to say about the coach on the floor. It's okay. We don't have to placate him. He's all right.
See, Sherman, we go back and forth because the point guards get all the coaching jobs. You know what I mean? Just like the catchers in baseball. So I had told Sonny that I was rooting for Patrick because I need the bigs to be represented. If you could name me 2 other big guys that got coaching jobs in the last 10 years, I'll buy you dinner, but I don't think you could do it. So it's always the point guards, you know?
When you look at the point guard, it's sort of like you say, it's the catcher. The catcher has to know everybody's position, what's going on. He calling, he telling them what's going on. It's always the point guard's the same way. We have you basically coaching, as I think Mark Jackson always said, you're coaching, that's your resume of coaching, calling plays, running through plays. When something get blamed, the coach calling you over to yell in your ear to get the other guys playing. So you've been doing that your whole life. So it's probably an easier transition than what a center is when he just always, you look at Patrick and those guys work with their back to the basket, and the game has changed now.
Right, exactly. So
I want to ask you, go ahead, Chuck.
So talk about this. So, let's get into the mindset of a good point guard, okay? So you have to know all 5 spots, not only offensively, but defensively, because you have to be able to tell a guy, hey, Everson, get over here, or you're supposed to be over there, DC, or whatever. How is that, at coming into a program like Syracuse that runs a bunch of sets? Defensively, we kind of knew what you were going to do, right? I mean, that's they played a little bit of man-to-man back then, but not much.
No. Let me correct this. We played a lot more man-to-man what they did now.
Well, now that's all they do. I mean, but it was kind of a morphing zone where you didn't really know what, like an amoeba kind of defense back then. No,
I can remember with me and Dirk Coleman, and we went to him. We said, "Look, coach, it's different because back then when we played, it was a 45-second clock, right? So you have a 45-second clock. If you play zone, it shortens the game, and if it shortens, and we weren't a great free throw shooting team, it will keep the other team into the game. And I can remember coming to coach, me and Dirk was like, we need to play man. You can't have all these top athletes on the team and sit and recruit these guys and sit in the zone.
Right.
It doesn't fit your personnel. We need to play man. We need to get up on people. And I think that what took off. But we did play zone too. I mean, that's the coach personality. That's his style. Play zone.
What about offensively? Having to know you guys, and I include Sonny in this too because he played the point, but you guys had to know where everybody was supposed to be all the time. That had to be difficult and challenging at times, especially when you get guys, and we all had guys like that didn't run the plays or didn't know where they were supposed to be or get nervous during a game and was in the wrong spot, that type of thing, right?
To be honest, it wasn't that difficult. It wasn't. Once you start playing point guards and you're going through drills and you're going through certain situations, because you have the ball in your hand, you have to know every position. To me, it wasn't that hard of knowing what guy had to be in what position, what's going on. And it got better as I got into the pro because you see teams 2, 3, 4, 5 times a year. I'm knowing the other teams play. I'm knowing what's going where the other guys need to be set up.
Right.
That's when I see Rajon Rondo playing when he used to play for the Celtics and play for the Lakers. He pointing out what other teams need to be because that was me. You need to know what the other teams playing to get them in position to tell them what's going on the defensive end, on the offensive end. If somebody's in the wrong position, or a lot of times you see guys but the coach will call a play in the huddle, and guys will walk out and say, "What did the coach play? What was the play?" And you have to tell them. That came natural to me, and it was really easy.
So, Sherman, I got to ask you because Pearl was such a beloved personality, guy at Syracuse that sort of started to define our team in a different way. Now you sat behind him. Now he makes the decision to go hardship. And like you said, you were back and forth, staying out. What was your reaction and where were you at in that process now?
I think I was it was summer. I think I was in I was probably still in Syracuse. I was maybe late my freshman year, late in the school year, late
Yep.
in the or maybe summer school or something like that.
Yep.
And I can remember that they say he was going to pro. And I was like, okay, this is my opportunity. This is my opportunity to play. But I did know that they was recruiting another point guard, Earl Duncan, to come in and to
Yep.
play. And it was back then they had the Prop 48. So we didn't know if he was going to pass that or whatever, but I was excited for the opportunity. I knew that he wasn't coming back. And it was up to me to not let nobody from coming from behind me start.
So, but now, so let's take it now the next step. So now you're in your sophomore year. And like you said, your team had great chemistry. So it's your first year starting. And ultimately, you end up in the final championship game. But how did you feel now starting out? Okay, this is my team. At what point did you feel like this is my team?
Ooh, I think that probably when we got into Big East play, you know, it's
Really?
easy. Yeah, it's sort of, it helps that you play St. Bonaventure, Cornell, Canisius, Buffalo State. You know, those are confidence boosters.
Yeah.
But when you get into conference play, that's when you know when you made your bones. Because I mean, not saying anybody can beat Cornell, Brown and those teams, but that's where you make your bones was when you playing in the Big East, when you playing against teams that you see two and three times a year. That's when you know that, okay, you arrive. And I think that for me, what helped me out, I got off to a good start. And looking back on it, it's like, wait, I didn't play that much my freshman year. And then my sophomore year, I end up the leading scorer on the team. I was like, okay, this is good.
Yeah, it doesn't stink. That's right. So let me ask you this now. So as you start to get in, like you said, Big East play, now you're starting to feel like these are my guys, this is my team. Because you said the team had great chemistry, yet you're in the shadow of the past point guard. So there had to be a lot, because Syracuse media is strong. There had to be a lot. Well, he's Pearl, he's not Pearl. At what point? Because you never talk about that in reference. You just have great praise for Pearl, and as a person you admire. But at what point though here now, or let's not say point, but at what during this time, how did you handle any of the, well, you're not Pearl, you're Pearl, you're Sherman? How did that handle it? Because you have big shoes. It's a big shadow.
They were big shoes, but I never tried to compare myself with them. I never let say that he was better, you was better. No, I played with him. That was still my old teammate, and I respected him. I respected the things that he put. Basically, in a nutshell, if you really look at it, he really in the modern era put Syracuse on the map.
Yep.
So there's no with that. He put, and I can remember one time Coach saying that any place he went during that era, it was like, "Oh, you Pearl's coach." Yeah. I mean, really made people say, "I got to go there." So I respected that from him, and I never wanted. I was better than him. I just wanted to play my style and the way I wanted to play.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's got to be hard though, because Syracuse, you're in a fishbowl, and everybody, and it's good that you're able to do that, because that's hard. That's a tough shoot. Like, we talked to John Wallace yesterday, and stepping in, and Derek, and he talked about the uniform and the number and kind of all that stuff. And you're right, you guys were different point guards, both successful in your own areas. You played at your style. How much now? Talk about your relationship with Coach now. So as this is your team, how did your relationship with Coach change?
It changed because when you're dealing with, I think the best part about it was he let you play your game. If you was a jump shots, if you're a jump shooter and you couldn't put it on the floor and you try to take it behind your back, he will go ballistic on you. And the tough part with me was, I'm thinking I'm playing well, I'm getting a lot of assists, and you might have a night where Ronnie don't get the ball. And Ronnie really wouldn't complain to me, he'd complain to Coach. The coach come to me. Then you got the next night, Dirk wouldn't get the ball as much as he can. Then they come to me, and then I get all this feedback. And that's something that you have to look forward to. And I can remember Bernie. And I think that Bernie Fine is one of the coaches I really respect. And I told him the other day, or it was like last year, I respect Bernie. A lot of things that what Bernie was telling me that I didn't value as a young basketball player until I got into the pros. And I said, Bernie, a lot of the things that you said to me, it may have went one ear out the other, but it stuck with me when I got to the pros, just on work ethic and being patient and listening. I can remember Bernie saying, Coach is going to yell at you, but listen to what he says, not the tone of what he says it, because the tone can really get to you if you let it get to you. And I can remember, saying, but Coach, he's just yelling at me for something I didn't do. And he would say, just listen and just nod your head, you got it, and move forward. And I respected Bernie because Bernie was a hard worker with the big guys, with Ronnie and Dirk. He made them put in the work, and I always respect Bernie for that.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. Chuck?
He seems to be the guy that was the buffer that all the guys from Syracuse talk about. Like, he was their guy, and he was the guy that they went to for different things where you couldn't go talk to Coach B. It was one of those type of things with him. And every team has got to have somebody like that on their team, don't you think?
You have to have a buffer. You have to have somebody to go in, but your coach also has to have, you can't just say in words, I have an open door policy. It has to be an open door policy. And you have to leave, after you finish, you have to leave everything in the room.
Right.
The goal is to win a championship, is to win as many games as you can. And I respect Bernie for that. Bernie was a great guy. To this day, I respect Bernie. He's a great friend, and I love him to death.
Sherman,
go ahead. I'm sorry, Sonny. Go ahead.
The one thing that's interesting, just thinking about, you talk about the different nature of your game. You're one of the point guards that I can think of that had the full gamut. Could make the long range shot, can hit the pull up, had the floater, had the dish, had the finish, take it hard to the basket. You had really a complete package that was different from any point guard that's ever been. Where did you pick up some of these skills?
Well, you learn a little on the way all the time. It's different now than what you played back then. I can remember, I was just talking to somebody the other day on a radio show, is you see young point guards now shooting from the logo.
Yeah.
My day, if you shot from the logo, you sat next to the coach. He wasn't
right.
Have the freedom to do whatever they want to, so they're a little bit more comfortable. And I remember him asking my question, and I said, I think that the players now are a little bit more talented than what they were. We had a back and forth on this. And I said, because now there's no more power forwards. There's no more like Oakley, Chuck Robinson, those big guys who all they did was rebound. The power forward is a small forward now who has a lot more skills. And the point guard has a lot more skills now. They have ball handling. They have freedom to do a lot of things that we didn't have to do. Our job is sort of like what Isaiah Thomas, Magic, and John Stockton.
Yep.
You control the game offensively, and you give the guys the ball in the right position to score the point. And Stockton was perfect with that. Karl Malone got the ball in the right position at the right time all the time. You didn't see him shooting three-pointers. You didn't see him shooting 20-footers. He was in the box. And the guys who ran the wings for Utah, they ran the wings perfect, and they got position, one bounce, and it was a layup. And that was my job, and that's what I wanted to do.
It's great
now,
stuff.
Sonny mentioned the floater. You seem to have been the guy to bring that shot into prominence back then. You were like the first guy to really figure out that I could float that ball up and get it to the rim without it getting blocked. How did that come about for you? Is that something that you worked on, or is that something that just happened naturally because you had all these big guys in front of you?
Well, bingo. There you go. You got a lot of things in front of you. You know that they have a lot of athletic ability, but one thing I can remember that they couldn't do, they can't outjump the ball. No matter how tall you are, how long you are, you're not going to outjump the ball. So I figured out if I get my shot off before them with a soft touch, that I can get it in the basket. And then what happened was, it was crazy. When they start coming out to get me earlier, that's when I throw it to lobs, to Ronnie, to Derek, to Billy O, to Stephen Thompson. And that's how getting dunks and easy baskets.
Yeah, because they didn't know whether you were going to float it up for a shot or float it up for a dunk, right? Yeah. So let's change gears a little bit, Sherman. Let's talk about taking that championship run in '87, getting into the Final Four, and that road that you guys took. Talk about that for a second with us.
Well, I mean, It was one of those where we were playing well throughout the year, and nobody really knew what we could do. We lost three of our top scorers was gone.
Yeah.
Rafa, Wendell, Alexis, and Pearl, and we come in with basically three new guys, freshmen, and I'm a sophomore, so nobody knew what we did. But Ronnie improved. Ronnie Cycling improved, and Derek Coleman was just a beast on the boards. So, I think that the key to our team was Greg Monroe and Howard Trish was keeping us steady. Greg was outstanding. He would shoot the ball and made big shots for us. It was just something about that team. We had a chemistry, and I didn't know if we could make it to the Final Four until we got to the second round. I think we beat Florida. And they had Vernon on that team and Dwayne Shinsis. And biggest challenge was I didn't know it was North Carolina. We had to play North Carolina to get to the Final Four, and I think that was one of Coach's really best coaching job. We knew what North Carolina could do. They like to trap the ball out front, which was Dean Smith's staple. When you pass the ball, the point guard would leave and go the other way, and Kenny Smith would trap. So what he had us to do, when I passed the ball, I would fake like I would go back over another way and get the ball in. Then he wanted me to make the play. He wanted me to have the ball in the hands so I can make the play to give it to Greg for a jump shot or Ronnie and Dirk inside. And the chemistry was just there that night.
Yeah. I mean, and then you get to the Final Four, right? And you had a familiar foe in the Final Four, right? You played Providence, right? Your first round.
Yeah,
and that was a big another time within the first 6-7 years of the league existence. We got two teams in the Final Four. Talk about what that was like playing those guys. And obviously you knew them, they knew you. That had to be a battle too.
It was a battle, but I think that Providence and Georgetown a little bit was probably the only team who will want to run with us. Every other team would try to slow the ball up against us, but that was Pitino's style. Pitino was a pressure in your face and try to speed the game up and shoot threes. And let me tell you something. I have much respect for Billy Donovan. Billy Donovan was a player back in that day, the Chicago Bulls coach. I mean, he had a crossover. He could shoot threes. Outstanding point guard then. We just had a little bit more talent than them. They played our same style of play. We just had a little bit more talent than them. And I think we beat them like 10, 12 straight times. So we were really confident of us going against them.
Yep.
So now talk about the finals, because now you're up against the other general, right? Robert Montgomery Knight. And I know coaching him, I think they have a pretty good relationship, but that's a matchup against an absolute Hall of Fame credentialed coach who his style, they're going to be different. But how did that, going into that game, how did that feel? Because everybody would say, you don't want to play Bobby Knight when he's got all this time to prepare. If you can get him on a short thing, you're better off. How did you guys prepare for that game?
Well, once you get to the Final Four, you want to stick with what got you there.
Right.
There's no change. We on a roll. We thought that we were a good team. Obviously, we were lucky. We was like, oh, did you see UNLV? UNLV had a really nice team back then.
Yeah.
Right.
Before Larry Johnson and all that, they had Armin Gilliam was on that team, and they had a pretty good team. We were just wanted to play our style of basketball. We thought that we maybe had advantage inside, and we want to try to keep getting the ball inside. Obviously, during the game, Steve Alford had a tremendous game of shooting and hitting threes, and Keith Smart made the shot.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, DC I think he had 25 boards in that game. He was a beast on the boards in that game and inside. And then it came down to foul shots at the end, though, didn't it, Sherman?
Came down to foul shots and execution. And they, we didn't hit our front end of 1-on-1s. And then they made theirs because you look at the last, thought that we had the game and won. But, it's 40 minutes, not 38 minutes. And they, they pulled it out.
They pulled it out. Yeah, on an unbelievable shot, which we had Keith on with Howard talking about the game, which was pretty interesting to have the guy that was guarding the guy and the guy that made the shot,
That's how, no, you didn't have Howard with Keith. That's unreal. No.
Oh, yeah. And you know what? it was funny because they had a
Never
good,
happened.
They really, I mean, Sonny, they really had a good interaction, right? They were asking questions that neither of them knew. And, he was trying to figure out how Keith got so open, and Keith told him exactly what he did, and got out of sight and, slipped into the corner there, It was a pretty interesting exchange, don't you think, son?
Yeah, it was. I mean, what Keith talked about, which Howard was really surprised, was what went on. Why did Keith Smart sort of turn the switch in the second half and play like he did, where in the first half he was somewhat invisible? And it was a few words from Coach Knight. So Sherman, you want to tell us a little bit, like when you talked about the chemistry you developed with that team, you want to share any curricular fun stories that you guys experienced, maybe on the road, maybe somewhere?
Well, I don't know what. Let me tell you something about this, and this is something I never got. I remember going on the floor. I can remember going Pat O'Brien's, and I can remember us hanging out, and we had a really nice time. And it's crazy. This year it's been probably, I don't know, 35 years since I've been to New Orleans. This year, the first time I've been to New Orleans since we lost that championship game. Never been back to. When I was playing the Pelicans was in the league, and that game hurt me so much, I just never went back to New Orleans. And because, when you have the championship in sight, get there, it hurts, and it hurt me. And, it was a bad situation. But I just remember, getting to that game. And I can think about this. For my 4 years in Syracuse, we went to the Big East Championship 4 years in a row. We only won one time. And I can remember talking to DC lately. I said, the only reason we won it one time was we were on E, the last championship game, all the time, because obviously, Sonny, when you're in Syracuse, it's 25 degrees is the high. We went to New York City, it's 40 degrees, and that's like a heat wave for us. Everybody coming from Syracuse, and that's normally when we had the Big East tournament, spring break for us. And I can remember we just went out every night, all the time, and it was amazing that we went to the championship game 4 years in a row. But that was, and I can remember my freshman year, what I thought was kind of crazy was, and you probably had this, Sonny, when we went to New York and we was on the road, everybody, it's like the 4 upperclassmen get cars. We didn't have a bus. So it was like the seniors get cars and you just go your separate ways. And I was like, that's kind of weird, But I mean, Syracuse was fun. I mean, that was the best 4 years of my life. I seriously think the best 4 years of my life in a place. It was great. It was a great opportunity to play with some of the guys that I played with in college and some of the against the guys. I mean, you look at that Villanova team with Kenny Wilson. I mean, he was a good point guard. Doug West. I mean, those competition that you had, and even Pittsburgh, the competition that we had back then was guys staying around for 4 years and 3 years. It was competitive. It was hard-nosed. It was a lot of fights. You look at Georgetown, Pittsburgh, Providence, and even Boston College with Dana Barrows. It was a competitive fight, night in and night out, and that prepared me to go to the NBA.
So now I just want to be clear. You said Patty O'Brien's down in New Orleans. Is that what you said?
It was Pat O'Brien's, yeah. Just go down.
Hurricanes.
Yes, you get drinks with the Hurricanes, and I can remember going down there and having the drinks, and it was a fun time. I mean, obviously we went to win a championship, and we had a nice time.
Great.
Talk about some of your memories of playing in the Big East itself. With like, who were the tough teams that you said, oh man, we got those guys tonight. This is going to be a war. We're going to have a problem with this guy or that guy. Who were the tough teams that gave you guys a hard time?
Well, obviously, Georgetown, because they're going to be in your face defensively. They're going to be ready to prepare to play against you. And another team, this got me back, was Seton Hall. Seton Hall was prepared. They were
Mark
ready.
Bryant.
They went to the Final Four. Remember, they went to the Final Four.
89, right?
Yeah, they went to and PJ was a good coach back then. They had a really good team there. Connecticut was getting better, and it was competitive. I mean, Pittsburgh was good. Jerome Lane, Demetrius Gore, Sean Miller, Charles Smith.
Yeah.
What I've noticed, and I always say this: you better be prepared to play night in and night out because the other team is trying to get you. And then when we played Villanova, we didn't play them on their campus. We played them at the Spectrum for a reason, because you're going to get a crowd, you're going to get people there, and they're going to get up to play.
Right. I think everybody got up to play everybody. There was no pushovers, it was all, everybody, you got everybody's best effort every time you stepped on the floor. That was one of the great things about the conference, I think,
That was, and I think the coaches too.
Yeah.
I mean, all those guys, Villanova's coach, I mean, all those guys was ready to play, and they were passionate about beating your butt.
Absolutely.
So and teams went from the bottom to the middle to the top relatively quickly. Patino did that in Providence. PJ did it at Seton Hall,
Connecticut.
Calhoun did it at Connecticut, and to a good extent too. So did the coach at Pittsburgh as well.
The natural attrition, it keeps turning and flipping around, which is nice because it keeps it competitive. Because like we talked to other guys that have been on Sherm, like a guy like you maybe wanted to play for Georgetown as a kid, okay, but they didn't recruit you, so maybe you wanted to go someplace where you can go beat Georgetown, and that was the mindset of some of the guys we talked to, and that's what I think happened, and how everything got flipped around when all the teams that were on the bottom for 4 or 5 years went up to the top, and that was kind of the cool thing about the league. I think it had a lot of effect on younger players coming in from high school,
But I think that geographically, where you're located was a basketball heaven.
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
DC and Baltimore. You got St. John's. I mean, you got New York City, Villanova, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, that area. You had everybody. Connecticut even had a New Haven and all that area. You had basketball heaven all that. The only one, Syracuse, is outlier because they didn't really have a lot of guys. There wasn't a basketball mecca, but I think that the campus, the on-campus, the dome, and all that made it an on-campus heaven.
I think the players too, sure. I think the players, you're instrumental in a lot of the things that happened too, and some of the players that you brought in. Do you remember any of the recruiting trips that you had to take guys out? Like Billy, was Billy one of your recruits? Was DC one of your guys? Some of the guys that you brought up and showed them Marshall Street and whatnot?
DC wasn't, because I was a freshman, so they give them to the upperclassmen.
Right.
I think I had Anthony Tucker because he was from DC, and they gave you guys who were sort of familiar with their area, and you go to Marshall Street, and it was, hey, whatever you want, whatever you need, drinks on me, pour them in. You had a good time. And people didn't realize, because we had guys, Stephen Thompson, Earl Duncan, and guys who were from LA. And I talked to them, I was like, how can you leave LA and come here? It's cold. There's no way I would do that. Campus was so much fun. The university was great. Everybody was a part of it. And you go to the dome and you look up, you're like, oh my God, I have to be here. And it kind of hurts me now that I turn on the TV and I think they played Pittsburgh the other night, and it was like nobody in the dome.
Yeah, Clemson game. Yeah, it
was like empty. And I can remember we used to get 25,000 on an orange and white scrimmage.
Right.
And you look at it now, it's like it kind of hurts. But every team, it's like a lot of teams going through that now.
All right. You want to talk about? Let's go to the NBA. Let's talk about getting drafted.
Hang on, before we get there, Sonny. Let's talk about your senior year for 1 second. I want in that game. I think it was against Pitt, right? Is that where you?
Oh, that's right. Yeah. Sorry.
So there was 3 records set in one game. You got the scoring title at Syracuse. You got the NCAA assist title, and the most people ever to see a game, right? In person, right? Is that?
In Connecticut. I know you. They were throwing records on the court. Yeah, I remember. I think it was when I told DC this the other day, about a while ago. It was a game where I broke the all-time leading scorer, all-time leading assist. And I can remember going to the sideline and we won the game and I was feeling real happy. And I can remember Derek Coleman me and say, I'm gonna break this next shit in a couple of years. Be my record. And I looked at him, I said, yeah, you're probably right. Because of how talented a player he was, how good of a player he was. But I think that was one of the best feelings I ever had, because you have to look at where I came in, didn't play that much my freshman year, wasn't a McDonald's big All-American recruit, was probably the third or fourth choice of point guards coming in, and you leave the university, the all-time leading assists, scoring, and steals. That made me feel great. I mean, that made me feel proud, like, you know what, I've done something, and you have to think about it, 2,000 points, almost 1,000 assists. That means I scored points and got other people involved in the game.
Yeah.
So I look back on that and say, you know what, I did what I was supposed to do.
Yeah, you made people better
in almost 3 years.
Times.
Yeah.
Almost 3 years too, because you didn't play much in your first year, you said, right? So let's culminate it, right? So what was the air about, getting drafted?
Getting drafted was tough because I knew I didn't go to a lot of the pre-camps. And I just wanted to say, hey, look, y'all saw me for 4 years, 3 years. Judge me on what you saw.
Right. That's how it should be.
Right. And if you see it, judge it. And I didn't go. It hurt me, but it helped me. I went to the best position possible. I went somewhere where I could play, where I could prove myself. And with a franchise that was young, that was eager to show its young players. And, I was disappointed that I didn't go in the first round, but it was a great decision for me to get drafted by Miami. And I went somewhere where Ronnie was there, somebody I was familiar with, and it made my transition a lot easier.
And you made the all-rookie team too, your first NBA year, right?
Yeah.
So it's a pretty nice transition.
It was a nice transition, but I think that another blessing was having Roy Spera playing with me, an old Villanova guy. But Roy was a good vet to have with you, because we always have side bets. And our side bets was, he wanted me to know the player who I was guarding and know him. It was sort of playing basketball from your head up. It's not always physical, it's not always mental. Mental has something to do with it. It's all about having confidence. And he was playing, and I say we playing against Boston. And you had Dennis Johnson, who would guard me. He would tell me, Sherman, if you cross over in front of you, he's going to steal the ball. Because DJ was about 6'3", he had long arms, a very good defensive player. And I can remember going down the court and crossed over in front of him because it was natural. He picked my pocket, went down court. And I can remember like, oh man, I owe Rory like $50 because that's what he told me, that watch out. That sticks with you. That tells you that you have to be professional about this job. You have to know everybody's skill level in this job, and you can't take nobody lightly.
And when you ended up in Boston, if I'm not mistaken, didn't Larry Bird, didn't he want you, like wasn't he like targeting, he wanted you on his team?
Well, Dave Gavitt was the GM,
right?
Dave wanted me. Boston was good for me because it was a learning experience. It was tough because you were in Boston. They expect winning, but we were in a tough situation because obviously Len Bias had passed away, so you lose a guy for 10 years. And then we had another all-star, Reggie Lewis, passed away.
Reggie Lewis, yeah.
Then you had Bird, Mikael Parrish pretty much on their last leg, and they retiring. It was a tough situation for us. We made the playoff a couple of times, but it wasn't we didn't have the same firepower that they would normally have in Boston. We were going through a transition there. So that was a tough situation, but you got to make the best of it. Nobody's going to feel sorry for you when you won 16 championships at that time. You got to pick yourself up and you got to play. And that's what the coach said. Nobody's going to feel sorry for you. You got to play, especially when you're the Celtics organization and you've been kicking everybody's ass for the last 20, 30 years.
Right.
That's true. It's a good point.
Eddie was on that team with you too, wasn't he, Sherman?
Oh, that, yes. Easy Ed. Yes.
Yeah. Yep. So let me ask you, so you get to play against Jordan 30 times. You couldn't beat him once, Sherman?
No,
one time?
One. The thing about it, you know what the tough part about it is, when you're playing in Miami, we were expansion. That was tough. It was
Right.
hard to. Then when you go to Boston, you lose everybody, and that was tough. You know what? My daughter gives me a hard time about that. You're absolutely right. It was just a luck of the draw that I just wasn't. I don't know what it was, but that's not a good stat to have. I can tell you that.
You know,
All
there
right,
was
sure.
in our due diligence, we saw that there was a video on YouTube. Do you know what I'm going to say? Where you and Jordan got into it back and forth, trying to draw with one of the best, trash talkers probably ever to play.
Right.
What do you remember that incident? Do you remember what I'm talking about? And Jordan kind of was laughing. He went over to Phil and told him what you said, but no one really knew what you said. So what did you say to him?
I don't remember what I said. I can remember that's what the year when we were. I think I was in New Jersey. That's
Right.
what I was in New Jersey.
Yep.
We played the first round, and that team had good chemistry. I wish that we could have stayed together a little bit longer. I was a little older, but we had Sam Cassell, Kendall Gill, Keith Van Horn, and I just loved the battle of watching Jason Williams and Dennis Rodman go at it. Those were two great offensive rebounders.
Yep.
People always talk, Dennis Rodman getting 20, 30 rebounds. It wasn't the defensive rebound. It was the offensive rebounds he was getting. Because anybody, but it takes still determination to get 10 offensive rebounds. Because that shows that you're hustling and doing some work. But in that series, we played Chicago tough. It was a first round. It was the best 3 out of 5. And we took them to overtime in game 1. And I can remember, Jordan, he always going to try to talk to you to pick himself up, to motivate him. And it was a good series for us. It was the first time I think Jersey was in the playoffs for a number of years. And I had a lot of great memories playing in Jersey that first.
So, Sherman, for people listening to this that don't know a lot, how many years were you in the league? Go ahead, tell everybody.
I was in 12 years in the
12
league.
years.
Long time.
Second round draft pick, right?
Yes. I wish it could have been a little longer, or I wish I could have been born now and been in the league for 12 years. I think that's a lot. It would have been a lot better.
A little more scratch, right?
Right.
A little bit.
Hey, Sherm, the other thing we forgot to talk about too with you is you could have been a long snapper with that play you made at the Garden against Indiana, the between the legs long snap for the dunk to Stevie, right?
Yes, with Stevie. One thing, and I can remember talking to DC about that. One thing about Stevie, he will fill the lane faster than anybody. I can remember getting out that pass and thinking I got an easy layup. Stephen Thompson was always there. He could cherry pick with the best of them.
You're not going to give the guy credit for having some speed, Sherm? Come on.
He was a good defensive player, great athlete, but he was down there fast. He could fill a lane. Stephen Thompson was a good basketball player, but he's a better person, better human being than that. Oh, I love him. Great person.
Sure. Remember, right? If somebody's feeding you and they're feeding you, well, you're going to make sure you're at the table dinner time. So
that's right.
If he ain't out there, he knows you're going to get him the ball. That's real simple. I could have been.
Let me tell you something. If I was playing with you, you'd be amazed at how fast I could get if I knew I was running with you. Keep my hands up so I don't get hit in the face and just get out there and get down.
You can make me move.
Yep.
Oh,
so we're running close on time here, Sherm. Give us your final thoughts about playing at SU and playing in the Big East. What are your final thoughts? What do you take away the most? What's your biggest memory of that time for you in the Big East?
My biggest memory of that time was, I think that looking back on it, I had a great time. I'm glad that as a team, some of the accomplishment of going to 4 straight, which is hard, even though we won it one time. Probably should have beat St. John's when Walter Berry blocked Pearl shot, but going to the championship 4 years in a row was hard. Not starting my freshman year and being all Big East 3 years in a row was something that I never thought I could probably do, and I did. I think I accomplished a lot of things in Syracuse. The only thing that we didn't accomplish was that Keith Smart shot and losing. But I'm proud of what I accomplished in Syracuse. I'm proud of our team, what we accomplished in Syracuse. I'm proud of the legacy that we left in Syracuse, of other guys coming behind me. It really picks me up to say, Sherman, you were the reason why I went to Syracuse. It makes me feel proud. I'm proud of the university, of where they are. And it was a tremendous, exciting experience. I wish I could do it all over again. I'm happy at the guys, even the guys who came before me, Marty Head, Roosevelt Boyd, Louis Orr, all those guys deserve a lot of making Syracuse the university, the basketball mecca that it is today.
Very
First
well
class,
said.
man.
I agree with you 100% as far as
First class, sir.
everybody
100%.
playing the guys that came before you, and that's important, and that's part of what makes the program. You don't get to do what you do unless they did what they did. So anyway,
Class.
Because you can't think it was all about you. It was guys before me. Tony Red, those guys, Eric Sandifer, those guys who came before me, and it made the Syracuse build the dome, build the facilities to get it going. And even the guys after me, Lawrence Moulton, John Wallace, and those guys, and obviously Carmelo Anthony, to keep the franchise university going and making it better and proud, and make upstate New York proud of that Syracuse University. And I'm happy to be a part of that legacy history.
It's great to be a part of something that's bigger than just yourself, right? I mean, that's what it comes down to, really. Well, thank you very, very much, Sherm. That you came on with us and you spent some time. Appreciate you giving up your night to hang it up with Sonny and I and chop it up a little bit about the old times in the Big East. We appreciate you, and we've been talking with the General Sherman Douglas on the Big East Rewind. The Big East Rewind was produced and directed by Nick Chico Chorus and Daryl Gurney. You can reach us on YouTube. If you go to put Big East Rewind in the search bar, all of our episodes will come up, and we ask you to hit like, subscribe, and share it with your friends. You can also catch up to Sonny and I if you need to make comments on the show or have any suggestions on who you'd like to see on the show. You can email Sonny and I at bigeastrewind@gmail.com. Thanks a lot for joining us, and have a great night.
Thanks, Sherm. Appreciate you.